The sunlight streamed through the kitchen window as I stirred my coffee, the hum of the morning feeling deceptively normal. Until she spoke. Yesterday, my boss invited me to lunch. We ended up in a hotel room and spent most of the day there. I loved it, and I'll probably do it again. Her words landed like a bombshell, shattering the fragile calm of our 24-year marriage. For a moment, I froze, unable to process what I'd just heard. Then, something inside me snapped. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming tales. The morning was heavy with the residue of last night's storm. Rainwater streaked the windows, and the air inside the house felt cool and damp, a stark contrast to the tension brewing at the breakfast table. Frank sat silently, cradling his second cup of coffee. The steam spiraled upward, momentarily distracting him from the unease that lingered after a restless night. He gazed out the window, his mind churning over the distance he had felt between him and Iris in bed. Something had shifted, but he couldn't yet put it into words. Their home, a testament to 24 years of shared memories, now felt like a hollow shell. The creaks of the wooden floor and the faint ticking of the wall clock seemed to echo the fragility of their marriage. It was here, in this kitchen, where countless mundane mornings had unfolded, that everything was about to change. Iris entered the room, her demeanor unnervingly calm. Behind her composed exterior lay a woman caught between guilt and a yearning for something she could not name. She sought the thrill of freedom, but seemed blind to the cost. Meanwhile, Ted, unseen but omnipresent, hovered in the background of their lives. As Iris's boss, he represented both opportunity and danger, a man whose actions would catalyze the unraveling of the life Frank thought he knew. The scene was set, a fragile trust about to shatter, and the first crack would come with Iris's words. The warm mug in Frank's hands suddenly felt cold as Iris, sitting across from him at the breakfast table, began to speak. Her tone was calm, too calm, her words delivered as casually as if she were discussing the weather. Yesterday, she began, her eyes fixed on the window. My boss invited me to lunch. We ended up in a hotel room and spent most of the day there. I loved it, and I'll probably do it again. For a brief moment, Frank's world came to a halt. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the kitchen clock, even his own heartbeat seemed to stop. He stared at her, his mind grappling with what she had just said, trying to decode her expression. Was this a joke? A cruel test? But Iris's face was calm, almost defiant, her gaze steady and unapologetic. The shock hit first, a tidal wave of disbelief that left him frozen. His lips parted, but no words came out. Could this be real? He thought. After 24 years of marriage, 2 grown children, countless shared moments, was this how it all unraveled? Illustrated? Finally, he found his voice, though it sounded foreign to his ears, strained and hollow. Why? He asked, his words dragging as if through quicksand. Would you tell me this? Iris shifted in her seat, crossing her arms. Because you deserve to know, she said simply. I don't want to live a lie, and I thought you should have the chance to decide what you want to do. Just when she thought this, some part of her made a slight decision. The words cut deep, but her nonchalance poured salt into the wound. The disbelief began to fade, replaced by a hot, simmering anger. Frank's grip on the mug tightened as he set it down with deliberate care, the faint clink of ceramic against the table breaking the tension for a split second. Decide? He said, his voice low but sharp. Decide what? Whether to throw out the woman who just told me she slept with another man and plans to do it again? Iris frowned, her defensiveness rising. It's not that simple, Frank, she said. I'm trying to be honest with you. Frank let out a bitter laugh, his sarcasm cutting through the air like a blade. Honest? He echoed. You think telling me about your little hotel escapade makes you honest? Here's an idea. How about being honest before you jump into bed with your boss? Her eyes narrowed, but there was a flicker of hesitation, a crack in her armor. "I don't know what I was thinking," she admitted, her voice softer now. "I just felt alive. For the first time in years, I did something for me. I didn't plan it, it just happened." Frank's chair scraped against the floor as he stood abruptly, pacing the small kitchen like a caged animal. "It just happened?" he repeated incredulously. "What does that even mean, Iris? You don't accidentally end up in a hotel room with your boss. You made a choice, a deliberate, conscious choice to destroy everything we've built." The weight of his words hung heavily between them. Iris looked down, her fingers tracing the edge of the table. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said quietly. "I still love you." He stopped pacing and turned to face her, his voice cold and steady. "Love?" he said. "Don't use that word. You don't get to cheat on me and then call it love. Love doesn't do this. Love doesn't throw away 24 years for a cheap thrill." The air between them was thick with tension, the fragile threads of their relationship fraying with every word. For the first time, Iris looked uncertain, her confidence faltering. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said, her voice trembling. "But I thought maybe we could talk about it." Frank shook his head, his laugh bitter and devoid of humor. "Talk about it? What's there to talk about? You've already decided I'm not enough for you." "I didn't say that," she protested, but her voice was weak. "You didn't have to," he shot back. "Your actions said it loud and clear." Silence fell over the room, the only sound, the distant rumble of thunder from the receding storm. Frank stared at Iris, his heart heavy with a mixture of anger, pain, and the faintest trace of sorrow. Trust, he realized, wasn't just broken, it was shattered. And no matter how much he wanted to, he didn't know if it could ever be pieced back together. Frank stood motionless, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, as if holding himself together was the only thing keeping him from exploding. The words churned in his mind, sharp and searing. Finally, he spoke, his voice laced with biting sarcasm. "So tell me, Iris," he began, his tone deceptively calm but loaded with venom, "why were you close to me last night? Do you like giving me sloppy seconds? Was that your way of soothing your guilt, offering me what was left after you were done with him?" Iris flinched at his words, her composure cracking for the first time. "Frank, don't twist it like that," she snapped, her voice defensive. "I was careful. I cleaned myself up before I came to you." The admission only fueled Frank's rage. He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head as if trying to clear the fog of disbelief. "Careful?" he repeated, his voice rising. "You think being careful makes this better? You think that somehow erases the fact that you came to our bed, to me, after being with him? Do you even hear yourself?" Iris's hands clenched into fists at her sides, her frustration mounting. "I didn't do it to hurt you, Frank," she said, her tone pleading now. "I didn't think—" An elation that much is obvious, he interrupted, cutting her off with a glare. "You didn't think, or maybe you did, and you just didn't care." She inhaled sharply, struggling to keep her composure. "It wasn't about you," she said finally, her voice trembling. "It was about me. I've spent years being the perfect wife, the perfect mother. I needed something more, something for myself." Frank's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing as her words sank in. "Something for yourself?" he echoed, his voice thick with disgust. "So, this was about your freedom, your need for excitement, and I was just collateral damage in your little rebellion?" Iris's gaze dropped to the table, her voice quieter now, tinged with guilt. "I just wanted to feel alive," she admitted. "I don't know what came over me, but it wasn't about replacing you or throwing us away. It was a mistake." "A mistake?" Frank repeated, his laugh humorless. "No, Iris, a mistake is forgetting to pay a bill or burning dinner. This was a choice, a deliberate, calculated choice to betray me." For a moment, the only sound was the distant ticking of the kitchen clock. Frank's mind was a whirlwind of emotions: rage, betrayal, and a deep, aching sorrow that he refused to show. He had spent years believing in the sanctity of their bond, trusting in the life they had built together. And now, with a few careless words, she had reduced it all to rubble. Iris, too, was fighting her own battle. Her reasons, once so clear in the moment, now felt hollow under Frank's piercing gaze. Why did I even tell him, she thought, a wave of regret washing over her. But another voice in her head pushed back. Because he deserves the truth. He deserves to know who I really am. Frank's voice broke the silence again, quieter now, but no less cutting. Did you feel guilty? He asked, his eyes searching hers. When you came to me last night, was it guilt that drove you, or was it just habit? Iris hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, she admitted. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe I was trying to see if anything had changed. Well, Frank said coldly, it has. Everything has. Clear. The weight of his words hung heavily between them, neither one daring to break the silence. For Frank, the trust he had once taken for granted was gone, leaving only bitterness and doubt. For Iris, the realization of what she had truly lost began to sink in. But the path to redemption, if it even existed, seemed impossibly far away. The silence in the house after their heated exchange was suffocating, broken only by the faint creak of the floorboards as Frank paced the living room. His chest felt tight, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. The words Iris had spoken, her calm confession and her justifications, echoed in his head, each syllable reopening the wound she had inflicted. Finally, he stopped pacing, turning to see Iris standing in the doorway, her expression a mix of defiance and regret. Her arms were crossed, a defensive posture that only heightened his frustration. You're moving into the guest bedroom, Frank said abruptly, his voice cold and flat. Tonight. Iris blinked, caught off guard by the sudden demand. What? Frank, you don't mean that. I mean every damn word, he snapped, cutting her off. His gaze was sharp, his tone leaving no room for argument. I want to make damn sure you don't give me something he's given you. Or worse, something he's given to God knows how many others. Her face went pale, the implication striking her like a slap. Ted wouldn't. She stopped herself. It was impossible that this was what he wanted, the last thing he needed. Don't, Frank interrupted, his voice lowering but no less dangerous. Don't you dare defend him to me. You have no idea what kind of man he really is. Just like I clearly had no idea what kind of person you'd become. Iris's hands tightened into fists at her sides, but her voice softened. Frank, I made a mistake. I told you because I wanted us to work through this. Frank laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and humorless. Work through this, he repeated. Iris, you didn't come to me for help before you threw our marriage under the bus. You didn't ask me if something was missing, if we could fix whatever you thought was broken. No, you went straight to him. I told you it wasn't about you, she shot back, her voice trembling with frustration. It was about me, about feeling like I still mattered. Then why are you here now? Frank countered, stepping closer. If this was all about you, why are you standing here trying to salvage whatever's left? Or is this just another way to make yourself feel better? Iris's eyes glistened, but she held back her tears. Because I love you, she said quietly. Because, no matter how much I messed up, I can't imagine my life without you. For a moment, the rawness of her words cut through Frank's anger, but the wound was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. He shook his head, his jaw tightening. I can't do this tonight, he said, his voice weary. Move your things into the guest room. I need space. And you? He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. You need to figure out what you want. The tension in the room was palpable as Iris nodded slowly, turning to leave. Her steps were heavy, as if the weight of their crumbling marriage was dragging her down. When she disappeared up the stairs, Frank collapsed onto the couch, his head in his hands. 24 years. The thought hit him like a sledgehammer. 2 decades of shared memories, of raising their children, of building a life together. It was all unraveling in the span of a single morning. His mind drifted to their wedding day, the way she had laughed as they danced at their reception, the vows they had exchanged. How had they ended up here? Upstairs, Iris sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room, staring blankly at the closet she now had to fill with her belongings. Her heart ached with regret as her mind replayed the moments that led to this. She had thought she wanted freedom, a break from the monotony of her role as a wife and mother. But now, sitting alone, she realized how much she had taken for granted. She glanced toward the door, half hoping Frank would come in, say something to indicate they weren't completely broken. But the silence was deafening. She had pushed him too far, and she knew it. Downstairs, Frank leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The house felt unbearably quiet, the kind of quiet that marked the absence of something once cherished. He had always believed their marriage could weather anything, but now he wasn't so sure. Trust, he thought bitterly, was like a glass. Once shattered, it didn't matter how carefully you pieced it back together. The cracks would always show. The clock struck midnight, but sleep seemed impossible for either of them. Upstairs and downstairs, they each wrestled with the weight of what they had lost, and the question neither dared to ask. Was this the end? Or could they ever find a way back? The next morning, Frank sat in his car outside a modest office building, staring at the bold letters etched into the glass. Douglas and Associates, Family Law. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pavement, but its warmth did little to thaw the cold knot of anger and sadness in his chest. He had made the appointment yesterday, his decisions stealing with every moment of silence that filled his broken home. Now it was time to move forward. As he stepped into the office, a young receptionist greeted him with a professional smile. "Mr. Frank Connors?" she asked. Frank nodded. "Mr. Douglas will see you now." He exited the office and resumed his previous pacing, which was pretty slow. The lawyer, a man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor, gestured for Frank to sit. "Tell me what's going on," Douglas said, leaning forward slightly. Frank took a deep breath, his hands gripping the armrests of the chair. "My wife cheated on me," he began, the words tasting bitter as they left his mouth. "With her boss. 24 years of marriage, and she just threw it all away." Douglas nodded, his expression neutral. "And you want to file for divorce?" "Yes," Frank said firmly. "And I want to know if I can sue the man she cheated with." "Ted Harrow." "An alienation of affection claim," Douglas replied, scribbling notes on a legal pad. "It's possible, though not easy. Do you have any evidence beyond what your wife told you?" Frank hesitated. "No, not yet. But I have her admission. She didn't just confess, she practically bragged about it." Douglas's pen paused mid-scribble. "If she's willing to testify to that, it might strengthen your case. But let me be clear. These claims can drag out and cost a lot. Are you sure this is what you want?" Frank stared at the lawyer's desk, his mind replaying Iris's words. "We ended up in a hotel room. I loved it, and will probably do it again." The image of her smiling as she said it burned in his mind. "Yes," he said finally, "I want to make sure he knows what he's done." After discussing the logistics, Frank left the office feeling drained but resolute. As he walked to his car, memories of happier times with Iris flooded his mind. He remembered the way she laughed as they danced at their wedding, the quiet nights spent planning their future, the joy on her face when their children were born. Those memories felt like artifacts from another life, one that was now out of reach. That evening, Frank sat at the dining table, staring at his phone. He had promised Marcy and Dave, their 2 adult children, that he would call. He knew Iris had already spoken to them, likely spinning her version of events, and he needed them to hear his side. He dialed Marcy first. She picked up on the second ring. "Hi, Dad," she said softly, her voice tinged with worry. "Hi, sweetheart," Frank replied, trying to keep his tone steady. "Your mom told you, didn't she?" "She said you're getting a divorce," Marcy confirmed. "She said it's her fault." Frank nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "It is. She cheated on me, Marcy." There was a pause, then Marcy sighed. "Dad, I don't even know what to say. I'm so sorry. Are you sure there's no way you two can work this out? You've been together for so long." Frank closed his eyes, the weight of her words pressing down on him. "I don't think I can, honey. What she did, it broke something in me. I don't know if I can ever trust her again." Marcy hesitated. "I understand, Dad, but I want you to be happy, whatever that looks like." "Thanks, Marcy," Frank said, his voice softening. "That means a lot." Later, Frank called Dave, their son, who was more direct. "So you're done with her?" he asked bluntly. Frank sighed. "It's not that simple, Dave." "Sure it is," Dave replied. "She cheated, she's out. Isn't that how it works?" "It's a little more complicated when you've spent 24 years with someone," Frank said. "But yeah, it feels like it's over." "Good," Dave said. "She doesn't deserve you, Dad." Frank felt a pang of sadness. "It's not that black and white, Dave. Your mom made a terrible mistake, but she's still your mom." "Doesn't mean I have to like what she did," Dave muttered. "But, okay. What do you need from me?" "Just be kind to her," Frank said after a pause. "For me." That night, as Frank lay in bed, his mind drifted to the life they had built, the holidays, the laughter, the struggles they had overcome together. Now, it all seemed like a distant dream. As much as he wanted to hold on to the good times, the betrayal was a chasm he couldn't see a way across. For now, all he could do was brace himself for the battles ahead. Iris sat on the edge of her bed in the guest room, the phone resting heavily in her hand. The weight of what she was about to do settled deep in her chest, pressing down like a physical burden. She knew the calls were necessary. Her parents, his parents, and most importantly, Marcy and Dave deserved to hear the truth from her. But knowing that didn't make it any easier. Her thumb hovered over the call button for a moment before she pressed it. The phone rang twice before her mother picked up, her familiar voice instantly bringing a pang of nostalgia. "Iris, what a surprise," her mother said warmly. "Hi, Mom," Iris replied, her voice quieter than she intended. I need to tell you something." Her mother paused, the shift in Iris's tone not lost on her. "What is it, dear? Is everything all right?" "No," Iris admitted, her voice trembling. "Frank and I are getting a divorce." The silence on the other end stretched long enough for Iris to feel compelled to fill it. "It's my fault, Mom. I made a terrible mistake. She faltered, the words catching in her throat. I hurt him," she said. Her mother's voice returned, tinged with shock and sadness. "Oh, Iris, what happened? After all these years? Why?" "I don't know," Iris whispered, tears welling up. I don't know." Later that day, Iris called Marcy, steeling herself for what she knew would be the hardest conversation. Marcy answered quickly, her tone bright and oblivious to the storm about to hit. "Hey, Mom, what's up?" "Marcy," Iris began, her voice shaking slightly, "I need to tell you something. Your father and I, we're getting a divorce." The cheerful tone vanished, replaced by stunned silence. "What?" Marcy finally asked, her voice barely audible. "Why?" "It's my fault," Iris said firmly. "I made a mistake, a big one, and your father can't forgive me." "I don't blame him." Marcy's breath hitched on the other end of the line. "What kind of mistake, Mom?" Iris hesitated. "I was unfaithful," she admitted, her voice cracking. "It happened once," but that doesn't make it better. I betrayed him, Marcy. There was a long pause before Marcy spoke again, her voice trembling. I don't even know what to say. You and Dad, you were my example of what a marriage should be. How could you do this? I don't have an answer for you, Iris said, tears streaming down her face. I was selfish. I let myself believe I deserved something more. And now I've ruined everything. Marcy sighed deeply, the sound heavy with disappointment. Does Dad even want to try to work it out? No, Iris said softly. He's made that clear. I just hope you can forgive me. I don't know, Mom, Marcy said, her voice raw. I need time. When Dave received the call, his reaction was starkly different. You did what? He demanded, his voice rising with anger. I cheated Dave, Iris said, her tone resigned. And now your father wants a divorce. Well, no kidding he does, Dave snapped. What were you thinking, Mom? After everything Dad's done for you, for us, you just throw it all away? Yeah, you've got your pick of bad men, she said, as if that were a solitary inner voice that she used to drive down her anger. Except you and your brother do a pretty good job squashing that one up top. I wasn't thinking, Iris admitted. I can't defend what I did. I'm just trying to take responsibility. Dave's voice was sharp, his disappointment cutting through the phone line. Yeah, well, good for you, I guess, but don't expect me to just brush this off. I'm not asking you to, Iris said quietly. I just wanted you to hear it from me. Fine, Dave said shortly, but don't expect me to take your side in this. The conversations left Iris emotionally drained, but she knew Frank's discussions with their children would carry a different tone. Unlike her confessions, his would be about reassuring them, offering some semblance of stability despite the chaos. That evening, Marcy called Frank, her voice shaky. Dad, she began hesitantly, Mom told me about the divorce and about what she did. Frank sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Yeah, I figured she would. I don't even know what to say, Marcy admitted. I'm just devastated. So am I, Frank said quietly. But I want you to know, Marcy, this doesn't change how much I love you and your brother. This is between your mom and me. But is there really no chance you can work it out? She asked, her voice pleading. You've been together for so long. Marcy, Frank said, his tone gentle but firm. Trust is the foundation of any relationship. Without it, there's nothing left to build on. I don't think I can ever trust her again. Later, Dave called, his approach more direct. So, what's next, Dad? Are you filing? I already have, Frank said simply. There's no going back. Good, Dave said, his anger toward Iris still palpable. She made her bed, let her lie in it. Frank sighed. Dave, I know you're angry, but she's still your mom. I'm not asking you to take sides. I know, Dave muttered, but that doesn't mean I have to be okay with what she did. As the night settled in, Frank sat alone in the living room, reflecting on the calls. His children's pain weighed heavily on him, but he also felt a glimmer of pride in their loyalty and honesty. For now, they were the one constant in a world that felt like it was crumbling. Frank sat at his desk, staring at the phone for a long moment. The weight of the decision to call Ted pressed heavily on him, but the anger burning in his chest was relentless. This man had invaded his life, shattered his marriage, and yet Frank knew Ted probably didn't feel the slightest pang of remorse. That thought alone pushed Frank to dial the number. The phone rang twice before a confident, almost smug voice answered. Ted Harrow speaking. Frank's grip on the receiver tightened. This is Frank Connors, he said, his voice cold and deliberate. There was a pause, then Ted replied, his tone casual. Ah, Frank, I've been expecting your call. The nonchalant response made Frank's blood boil. I'm sure you have, he said sharply. Let me make this simple. She's all yours now. Ted chuckled lightly, as though Frank's words were a joke. Is that so? Well, I wasn't planning on keeping her. The dismissiveness in Ted's voice was like gasoline on a fire. Frank shot back, his tone cutting. That's funny, coming from the man who spent the day in a hotel room with her. But don't worry, you won't have to play games anymore. She's moving out of my house, and when I'm done with you, you'll wish you'd stayed far away from my family. Ted sighed, the sound exaggerated and dismissive. Look, Frank, I get it, you're upset. But let's be adults here. This isn't the first time something like this has happened, and it won't be the last. These things just happen. These things just happen? Frank repeated, his voice rising. You think you can shrug this off like it's nothing? You don't just happen to sleep with another man's wife, Ted. You chose to. And now you're going to deal with the consequences. Ted's tone turned cooler but still patronizing. What are you going to do, Frank? Punch me? That won't fix your marriage. If Iris was looking elsewhere, maybe you should ask yourself why. And maybe you should spend some time focusing on you. The sheer audacity of Ted's words made Frank's vision blur with rage. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. You're going to regret this, Ted. I've already contacted my lawyer. We're filing for divorce, and I'm coming after you next. Filing a lawsuit? Ted asked, his voice laced with amusement. Good luck with that. Do you even know how hard it is to prove alienation of affection? You'll waste your money and your time. I don't care about the money, Frank shot back. This isn't about compensation. It's about making sure you pay for what you've done. Ted laughed, the sound grating and dismissive. You think dragging this through the courts is going to hurt me? Go ahead, Frank. Do your worst. But I'll tell you now, you won't win. End of chapter 1. Frank's knuckles turned white as he gripped the phone. We'll see about that, he said through gritted teeth. You're not walking away from this unscathed. For a moment there was silence, and then Ted's voice came through, softer but no less condescending. Frank, take some advice. Let it go. This isn't worth destroying yourself over. Life moves on. Frank's voice dropped, steady and resolute. You destroyed something precious, Ted. You don't get to decide how I move on. I'll see you in court. Without waiting for a reply, Frank slammed the phone down, his chest heaving with a mix of fury and bitter satisfaction. The conversation had gone exactly as he'd expected. Ted's arrogance and lack of remorse were infuriating, but unsurprising. Still, the call had cemented Frank's resolve. This wasn't just about Iris anymore. It was about standing up for himself, for the life that had been torn apart by Ted's selfishness. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling as the weight of the encounter settled over him. For the first time in days, his thoughts weren't consumed solely by Iris's betrayal. Now there was a new focus, a new battle to fight. And while the pain of losing his marriage still loomed large, Frank found a grim sense of purpose in holding Ted accountable. The next morning, Frank sat across from his lawyer, recounting the call in detail. Douglas listened carefully, nodding as he jotted down notes. It's clear he's not going to cooperate, Douglas said finally. But his arrogance might work in our favor. If we can establish a pattern of behavior, or find witnesses who can confirm the affair, we might have a case. Frank nodded. I don't care how long it takes. I want him to know he can't just walk away from this. Douglas gave him a measured look. This won't be easy, Frank. You need to be prepared for a fight. I've been fighting my whole life, Frank said quietly. I can handle this. As Frank left the office, the anger in his chest burned a little less fiercely. It wasn't closure, far from it, but it was a step, and for now, that was enough. The living room buzzed with chatter as family and friends mingled during Marcy's birthday celebration. Frank lingered near the kitchen, sipping from a glass of sparkling water. The familiar hum of voices, clinking glasses, and bursts of laughter filled the air. But Frank's focus was elsewhere. He had known Iris would be here. Marcy had made sure of it. But nothing could have fully prepared him for the moment when he saw her walk in. dressed in a deep blue dress that matched her eyes. Iris seemed hesitant as she entered the room. Her gaze flitted around, finally landing on Frank. For a moment, their eyes locked, and the noise of the room seemed to fade. Frank felt a strange tug, a mix of anger, sadness, and something else he couldn't quite name. He quickly looked away, pretending to examine the drink in his hand. Marcy, ever the keen observer, appeared at Frank's side. "You don't have to avoid her, you know," she said softly, her tone gently coaxing. "It's my birthday. Can we try to get through this without tension?" Frank exhaled sharply, his grip tightening on the glass. "I'm not avoiding her," he muttered. "I just don't know what to say." "Maybe you don't need to say anything profound," Marcy replied. "Just talk. You both look miserable." Frank shot her a look, but she was already gone, heading toward Iris. He watched as Marcy leaned in, whispering something to her mother, who glanced in his direction before nodding hesitantly. Later in the evening, as the crowd thinned, Iris found herself near Frank at the dessert table. The silence between them was heavy, but neither seemed willing to break it. Finally, Iris spoke, her voice tentative. "How are you, Frank?" He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "I'm fine," he said curtly, then added, You? "I'm managing," Iris replied, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of a napkin. "It's been difficult." Frank's jaw tightened, the words sparking a flood of emotions. "Difficult?" he echoed, his voice low but pointed. "You made a choice, Iris. You don't get to call it difficult." Her eyes glistened, but she held his gaze. "I know," she said softly, "and I'll carry that choice for the rest of my life. But it doesn't mean I don't regret it." The raw sincerity in her voice caught Frank off guard. He opened his mouth to respond, but was interrupted by Marcy, who appeared between them, holding 2 glasses of wine. "Here," she said, handing them each a glass. "If you're going to have this conversation, at least relax while you do it." Frank raised an eyebrow at her, but Marcy just smiled. "For me," she said, before slipping away. They stood there awkwardly, sipping their wine in silence. Finally, Frank spoke, his tone softer. "Why did you come tonight?" "It's Marcy's birthday," Iris replied, her voice steady. "I wasn't going to miss it. And I wanted to see you." Frank stiffened at her honesty but didn't respond. Instead, he looked out the window, watching the twinkling lights in the garden. "We can't keep pretending everything's fine," he said finally. "I'm not pretending," Iris said. "I know everything isn't fine. I know I destroyed what we had, but I still—" She hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I still care about you, Frank. I always will." Frank turned to her, his expression conflicted. "Caring isn't enough, Iris. Not after what happened." "I know," she whispered, tears threatening to spill. "But I'm here. And if there's ever a chance, no matter how small, I'll take it." But a week later, at a family barbecue, the tension between them was still palpable, though softened by their last exchange. Marcy, ever the peacemaker, orchestrated small moments where they were forced to interact, passing plates, standing in the same conversation circle, or playing with her nephew together. At one point, Frank found himself next to Iris as they watched Marcy and her friends laughing near the grill. "She's determined, isn't she?" he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "She gets that from you," Iris replied, smiling faintly. Frank glanced at her, surprised by her response. "I'm not sure I see it." "I do," Iris said quietly. "You've always been strong, steady. That's why it hurts so much to know I let you down." Frank didn't reply, but the words lingered between them. He felt the familiar ache in his chest, the pull of old emotions he had tried to bury. As the evening wore on, he couldn't help but notice the way Iris still fits seamlessly into the family dynamic, helping with the food, laughing with the kids, offering quiet support to Marcy. When the event wound down and the guests began to leave, Marcy pulled Frank aside. "See?" she said with a small smile. That wasn't so bad. Frank sighed, his expression softening. No, it wasn't. You don't have to decide anything right now, Marcy said gently. But don't close the door completely, okay? As Frank drove home, her words echoed in his mind. He wasn't sure if reconciliation was possible, but for the first time, the idea didn't feel entirely out of reach. Perhaps some bridges weren't meant to be burned. The drive to California was both liberating and suffocating for Frank. On one hand, the open road symbolized a fresh start, a chance to leave behind the debris of his fractured marriage. On the other, the miles stretched endlessly, giving him too much time to think, to replay the moments that led to his new reality. By the time he arrived in Santa Monica, the ocean air was a welcome distraction, offering a brief reprieve from the weight in his chest. Frank's new job quickly became his anchor. Days were long, filled with meetings, deadlines, and getting to know his new team. The intensity of the work helped keep his mind occupied, but the nights were harder. Alone in his modest apartment, the silence crept in, bringing with it memories he couldn't suppress. The laughter he and Iris once shared, the warmth of her presence, even the arguments. All of it haunted him. It was Marcy who encouraged him to step out of his comfort zone. You're in California, Dad, she said during one of their phone calls. You can't just work all day and hide at night. Go out, meet people. You might surprise yourself. And reluctantly, Frank took her advice and began frequenting a local lounge, a lively spot with live music on weekends. It was there he met Mel. Mel was unlike anyone Frank had ever encountered. She was bold, unapologetic, and exuded an effortless charm that drew people in. Their first conversation began over a shared laugh at the bartender's attempt to juggle cocktail shakers. Mel had a way of cutting through small talk, diving straight into topics that caught Frank off guard. You're new here, huh? She observed, her dark eyes studying him with curiosity. You've got that fresh start look about you. Frank chuckled, a little self-conscious. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's been there, she replied, raising her glass. To fresh starts, however messy they might be. Their connection was instant, though uncomplicated. Mel made it clear early on that she wasn't looking for a relationship. Commitment's not my thing, she said with a grin, but I'm great company if you're up for some fun. For Frank, it was exactly what he needed, or so he thought. Their casual arrangement was lighthearted and free of expectations, but no matter how much he tried to immerse himself in the present, the past clung to him like a shadow. One night, after a particularly enjoyable evening with Mel, Frank found himself staring out the window of his apartment, the city lights flickering below. Despite the laughter they'd shared and the comfort her presence provided, an ache lingered. His mind wandered back to Iris, not to the betrayal, but to the years before, the warmth of her hand in his, the quiet moments spent planning their future. Mel noticed his distance the next time they met. You're somewhere else tonight, she said, her voice softer than usual. Want to talk about it? Frank hesitated before replying. I thought moving here would be a clean slate, he admitted. But I'm starting to think some things can't be left behind. Mel regarded him thoughtfully. You don't have to leave it all behind, she said. Sometimes it's about finding a way to carry it differently. Where's Father? As the weeks passed, Frank and Mel continued to spend time together, but the arrangement remained surface level. For all her vibrancy, she couldn't reach the parts of him still tied to his old life. Frank began to realize that no amount of distance or distraction could fully erase what he'd lost. California might have been a new chapter, but the story he was living hadn't quite resolved. For now, he would take things one day at a time, knowing that moving forward didn't mean forgetting, it meant learning to live with the scars. Frank returned home from work on a rainy evening, shaking off droplets from his coat as he stepped into the warmth of his apartment. On the small table by the door, he noticed an envelope. A stark white rectangle against the dark wood. His name was written in Iris's familiar handwriting, the sight of it enough to stop him mid-step. He hesitated, his fingers hovering over the envelope. Part of him wanted to toss it into the trash unopened, to avoid whatever emotional storm it might unleash. But curiosity, or perhaps something deeper, won out. He carried it to the couch, sat down, and carefully opened it. The letter began simply, "Dear Frank, I've spent weeks trying to find the right words, though I know none will be enough. But I owe it to you and to the life we shared to try. First, I need you to know how deeply sorry I am. What I did was reckless, selfish, and unforgivable. I hurt you in ways I can't even begin to imagine, and I'll carry that guilt with me for the rest of my life. You didn't deserve this, Frank. You never did. This is the best gift I could give myself at this point. When I think back to our years together, I see so much more than just the betrayal that ended it. I see the man who stood by me through everything, the good times, the struggles, the mundane moments that made up our life. I see the way you loved me, even when I didn't deserve it. And I see the weight of my actions now, knowing that I shattered something so precious. I won't ask for your forgiveness because I know I haven't earned it. But I want you to understand that what I did wasn't about you. It wasn't because you weren't enough, because you always were. It was about me and my inability to appreciate what I had, to value the life we built. I was searching for something I thought I was missing, only to realize too late that everything I needed was right in front of me. Frank, I still love you. I know those words might mean nothing now, but they're true. I love you and I always will. I don't expect you to come back or even to respond to this letter, but I needed you to hear it from me, to know that despite everything, my feelings for you never faded. I hope you find happiness, whether it's with someone new or in the life you're creating now. You deserve that, and so much more. With all my heart, Iris." Frank's hands trembled slightly as he set the letter down. The words hit him like a wave, pulling him under. He felt a surge of anger at her audacity to write such things after all she'd done, but also something softer, something he didn't want to name. Her admission, her regret, and her love all stirred a part of him he thought he had buried. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, the letter still clutched in his hand. Did he believe her? Could he? More importantly, did it even matter? The answers didn't come easily, and as the rain tapped against the window, Frank felt the familiar ache of unresolved emotions settling deep in his chest. For now, he folded the letter and placed it in his desk drawer, unsure of what it meant for his future, but unable to throw it away. The soft hum of conversation and clinking glasses filled the elegantly decorated hall. Frank stood near the bar, nursing a glass of wine he wasn't particularly interested in drinking. The event was a charity gala, an obligation from his new job that he had reluctantly agreed to attend. The crowd was a mix of local professionals and familiar faces from the social circles he was slowly getting accustomed to. As he scanned the room, a flash of blue caught his eye, and his chest tightened. It was Iris. She stood near the center of the room, talking to a group of people with a poised smile that seemed both genuine and strained. Her dress, a deep shade of sapphire, hugged her figure in a way that made her impossible to ignore. For a moment, Frank froze, his grip on the wine glass tightening as emotions he thought he'd buried surged to the surface. Anger, sadness, and something dangerously close to longing. Mel, standing beside him, noticed the shift immediately. "You know her," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Frank hesitated before nodding. "That's Iris, my ex-wife." Mel studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. "You're not over her," she said, more a statement than a question. "It's complicated," Frank admitted, his voice barely audible over the noise of the room. Mel sighed, setting her glass on the bar. "Frank, you're a great guy, but I'm not here to compete with ghosts." She gave him a small, bittersweet smile before turning and walking away, disappearing into the crowd before he could respond. Frank exhaled deeply, the sudden absence of Mel barely registering as his attention was drawn back to Iris. She was now laughing at something one of the men in her group had said, her hand lightly touching his arm. The sight made Frank's stomach twist. Who the hell is he? The thought came unbidden, sharp and possessive. Before he realized it, he was moving toward her, weaving through the crowd with a determined stride. By the time he reached her, the man had asked Iris to dance, and she was following him to the dance floor. Frank stopped in his tracks, watching as they began to move to the slow rhythm of the music. The man's hand rested on Iris's lower back, and something inside Frank snapped. He closed the distance in a few quick strides, ignoring the curious glances from those nearby. Without a word, he tapped the man on the shoulder. The man turned, startled, as Frank said evenly but firmly, "I'm cutting in." "Excuse me?" the man replied, looking between Frank and Iris with confusion. "I said I'm cutting in," Frank repeated, his voice low but leaving no room for argument. His eyes met Iris's, and for a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. "Frank," Iris began, her voice tinged with both surprise and something else. "Relief?" The man hesitated, clearly unsure of what to do, but Iris nodded subtly. "It's fine," she said, stepping closer to Frank as the other man walked away with a shrug. As they began to dance, the air between them was heavy with unspoken words. Frank's hand rested lightly on her waist, his movements stiff and awkward. "So," he said, breaking the silence, "that guy seemed friendly." Iris's lips pressed into a thin line. "He's just a colleague," she replied. "Nothing more." Frank raised an eyebrow. "Looked like more." Her gaze met his, a flicker of irritation sparking in her eyes. "Why does it matter to you, Frank? You've moved on, haven't you?" He opened his mouth to reply but faltered, the words catching in his throat. Had he? Mel's departure moments ago suggested otherwise. He sighed, his tone softening. "I don't know." They moved in silence for a few beats, the music swirling around them. Finally, Iris spoke, her voice quieter. "You still make everything so complicated." "Aha," she said defiantly. Frank's jaw tightened. "Complicated? That's rich, coming from you," Simon said with a grin. "I'm not the only one holding on to the past," she shot back, her tone defensive but tinged with pain. He looked away, his grip on her waist loosening slightly. "Maybe I am," he admitted. "But it's hard to forget 24 years, Iris. Even harder to forget how it ended." Her eyes softened, her gaze searching his. "Do you think I've forgotten? I live with it every day, Frank. Every time I walk into a room like this, I wonder if you'll be there. And when you are..." She hesitated, her voice trembling slightly. "It's like I can breathe again, even if it hurts." The vulnerability in her words caught Frank off guard, cutting through his anger. He stopped moving, the music continuing around them as he looked at her. "Iris?" She shook her head, forcing a small, sad smile. "I'm not asking for anything, Frank. I needed you to know." The moment hung between them, fragile and uncertain. Before Frank could respond, the song ended and the spell was broken. Iris stepped back, her hands slipping from his. "Good night, Frank," she said softly, before disappearing into the crowd. Frank stood there, rooted to the spot, as the noise of the gala swirled around him. For the first time in months, he felt the walls he had built around his heart begin to crack. Whether it was a step forward or backward, he couldn't yet tell. The following evening, Frank sat in his small living room, the steady ticking of a clock filling the silence. He had barely slept since the gala, his thoughts consumed by the unspoken tension between himself and Iris. The knock at the door was soft, tentative. He knew it was her before he even opened it. Iris stood on the other side, her coat pulled tightly around her, the night's chill evident on her cheeks. She looked hesitant, almost fragile, but there was a determination in her eyes. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. Frank nodded, stepping aside to let her in. She moved past him into the living room, her gaze briefly sweeping the room before settling on the couch. He followed, taking a seat across from her. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence waited with anticipation. Finally, Iris broke the quiet. "I shouldn't have gone to the gala," she admitted. "But I couldn't help it. I wanted to see you." Frank leaned back, his arms crossed. "Why? So we could have another awkward encounter? So you could remind me how much everything's changed?" Her face fell, but she didn't look away. "No. I went because I miss you. I've missed you every day since this all fell apart." Frank's jaw tightened, his voice steady but edged with emotion. "You don't get to miss me, Iris. You're the one who threw it all away." "I know," she said, her voice trembling. "I know I ruined everything. I don't expect you to forgive me, Frank. But I need you to understand why." He shook his head. "I don't think there's anything you could say that would make me understand." She hesitated, then spoke quietly. "I wasn't looking for someone else. I wasn't unhappy with you. I wanted to feel alive again. I wanted to do something reckless, something that wasn't about being a wife or a mother. And in the moment, I thought I needed it, but I didn't realize it would cost me you." Frank exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "And now you do?" "Of course." Drayton smiled. "Now I do," she whispered. "And it kills me, Frank. I traded everything for nothing, and I've been living with that regret ever since." For a long time, Frank didn't respond, his eyes fixed on the floor. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost weary. "I still care about you, Iris. I think I always will. But I don't know if I can forgive you." Her eyes glistened, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but if there's even a small chance, I'm willing to wait." Frank met her gaze, his own emotions raw and unguarded. "It's not about time," he said quietly. "It's about trust. And I don't know if that's something we can ever get back." They sat in silence, the truth of his words settling between them. Yet within the stillness, there was a faint glimmer of understanding, a fragile bridge between the pain of the past and the uncertainty of the future. Whether it was enough, neither could say, but for now, it was something. The late afternoon sun poured through the large windows of Marcy's home, casting a warm, golden glow over the living room. Frank sat on one end of the couch, Iris on the other. The silence was not heavy this time, but tentative, like a blank page waiting for the first stroke of ink. Marcy stood in the kitchen, pretending to busy herself with dishes, though her attention was firmly on the two people in the next room. Frank finally broke the quiet, his voice measured but sincere. "I don't know how this is supposed to work, Iris. I don't even know where to start." Iris folded her hands in her lap, her gaze steady though her voice wavered. "Neither do I, but maybe we don't have to know right now. Maybe we just take it one step at a time." Frank nodded slowly, the lines on his face softening just a little. "No promises, no expectations, just seeing if there's still something left worth fighting for." Iris's lips curved into a faint smile, her relief evident. "That's more than I could have hoped for." Marcy emerged from the kitchen then, carrying 2 mugs of tea as an excuse to join them. She placed them on the coffee table, her movements deliberate but casual. "It's good to see you two talking," she said lightly, her eyes flickering between them. "Whatever happens, I think it's worth trying." Frank and Iris both glanced at her, the corners of their mouths lifting ever so slightly. There was an unspoken acknowledgement in their shared look, gratitude for the daughter who had refused to give up on them. As the sunlight shifted, casting long shadows, Frank leaned forward and picked up his mug. His hand brushed against Iris's for the briefest of moments, and they both froze, the simple touch carrying a weight of unspoken emotion. Frank didn't pull away. Instead, he looked at her, his expression softening just enough to let hope slip in. Iris met his gaze, her eyes reflecting the same tentative hope. "One step at a time," she repeated, her voice almost a whisper. Marcy smiled as she moved back to the kitchen, leaving them alone again. From her vantage point, she saw them share a moment, a quiet, symbolic beginning. The faint glow of the sun, the warmth of tea, and the brush of their hands spoke of reconciliation not yet realized, but no longer impossible. It was enough, for now.